We want to look at the latest intrigue in Iran after a military commander died over the weekend in a massive explosion.
And that has led to growing speculation that this wasn't actually an accident at all, that in fact it may have had everything to do with Iran's nuclear program. CBS News correspondent Mark Phillips joins us from London this morning with more on that. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, Erica. Well, Iran is a country that functions on rumor and intrigue, and the blast there over the weekend has sent the rumor mill spinning like a centrifuge refining nuclear material.
When the top of the Iranian mullah hierarchy comes out for a funeral, you know somebody important died. So when Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei was seen prominently at the funeral of Hassan Mokaddam and 16 other Revolutionary Guards, it was clear something big had happened. At first, the news broadcast on Iran's satellite channel was vague.
The IRGC confirms the explosion.
But it soon became clear that a major explosion had taken place at the base west of Tehran, where Iran is developing long-range missiles, the kind that could carry the nuclear warheads they're suspected of trying to build. Hassan Mokaddam is known as the architect of Iran's missile program. So was this an accident, as was officially claimed, or was this another example of sabotage by some outside power? Suspicion inevitably falls on Israel. And Israel inevitably doesn't comment, although it does have a history, having flattened Saddam Hussein's nuclear facility at Osirak in Iraq in 1981. Tehran's nuclear program is back in the headlines because the UN nuclear agency's last report cited credible evidence that Iran's nuclear intentions were military. And despite Iran's repeated denials, many think developing the bomb is still an Iranian ambition.
There's a prestige value with nuclear weapons. It's part of an entree to a special club. And the Iranians are proud people, and they see nuclear technology as demonstrating their scientific worth.
At the very least, there are calls for increased sanctions on Iran and increasing discussion as well about what to do if the sanctions alone continue to have effectively zero effect on Iranian nuclear ambitions. Erica?
Mark Phillips in London this morning. Mark, thanks.
And joining us now is former Assistant Secretary of State Jamie Rubin, executive editor of Bloomberg View. Mr. Rubin, good to have you with us here this morning.
Nice to see you.
Israel's defense minister Ehud Barak criticized, well, didn't criticize, but says with the bombings this weekend, he'd like to see more explosions there. Something like that, an inflammatory comment, and then you hear of this death with this explosion. Do you feel Israel was behind this in any way, shape, or form?
Well, there have been some reports in various websites and other relatively reliable sources that the Israelis are behind it. It's certainly plausible. He's the head of the ballistic missile program, the one who was killed. A similar scientist on the nuclear side, the actual nuclear weapons side or the nuclear technology side, was assassinated. And this particular individual who was killed this weekend had the largest security detail, apparently, of anyone in the country other than the leadership. So it's certainly plausible that this is part of Israel's slow but covert effort to delay the danger of Iran having a nuclear weapon.
You mentioned some other publications. Time magazine specifically is actually saying a Western intelligence source, is how they phrase it, has said that Mossad is behind this, and that source says, quote, there are more bullets in the magazine. I mean, would this be, though, not only an effective, but frankly, a smart move for Israel to do something like this and to potentially have more bullets in that magazine?
Well, the problem is, as your correspondent Mark Phillips suggested at the end, sanctions aren't working. They're pretty tough sanctions. They're not as tough, perhaps, as some would like. Some people suggest an oil embargo is necessary. One really doesn't expect the world to do that at a time of economic difficulty. So if you look back over the last several years, even as the sanctions have been ratcheted up, there's been no impact on Iran's program. They continue to pursue nuclear weapons capability. So if you're not going to be able to stop it from sanctions, the only other way to stop it is a military strike, which has very, very, very serious consequences for the region, for the world, for the economy, for a war in the Middle East. If you can delay having to make that decision by these smaller steps, by computer viruses, some have suggested come from Israel and perhaps in conjunction with the United States, or these assassinations or other so-called covert programs, that's certainly a better, more palatable option to governments than having to face this yes or no choice on starting another war in the Middle East.
Well, that was my next question to you, because President Obama has relied heavily on sanctions, which we have now just discussed are not working. So what is the U.S.'s involvement as we move forward?
Well, President Obama's got a bit of a problem. On the one hand, the situation on the ground in Iran is not getting better. He's promised, like President Bush before him, that he will not allow Iran to develop and obtain a nuclear weapon. But his policy isn't working. Iran continues to get closer and closer and closer. Meanwhile, the lead challenger, Mitt Romney, the Republican, has made clear that if necessary, Mitt Romney, would use military force. That's something President Obama has not said. He has not said flat out he would use military force if necessary. So the pressure politically to solve this problem, the pressure economically is not working. Where does that leave President Obama? It's a tough spot. Obviously, he doesn't want Israel to get a nuclear weapon, but like many Israelis, former intelligence officials in Israel, he's very, very worried about the danger of starting another war in the Middle East.
All right, Jamie Rubin, thank you. Good to talk to you this morning.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.